Thank you. There we go. Over to you, Rabbi Bennett. There we go.
Good morning to everyone. Thank you again to Rabbi Jacobson for the invitation. Lovely to be here. And as I always pay tribute to start your day with not only coming to shul, so there's the mitzvahs done with talis and tefillah b'tzibur, all of those things happening, and as Rav Avi was talking about, obviously the laning, the day of the laning, but also having the camaraderie and social element of getting all together is beautiful to see. And there's an added bonus on the Tuesday of not only the croissant and the delicious breakfast, but some words of Torah to start the day with. So I thought we would discuss today a pretty enigmatic day within the Jewish calendar, which is coming up, in fact, this week in a couple of days, which is Tu B'Av. So we'll notice on Tu B'Av, in fact, from Yud Daled, we're not going to say Tachnun Mincha, and on Tu B'Av itself, there'll be no Tachnun. That's pretty much all we kind of do today, or we don't do, in terms of adaptation of our daily routine. But what is fascinating to look at is the way that our sages describe this day, the 15th of Av, Tu B'Av, is in the most incredible praises of the nature of the day. In fact, the Mishnah says that there are two choice days within the Jewish calendar that are the most significant, which are, unsurprisingly, if we'd have a poll around the room, I'm sure we get the first, which is Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, the day in which the Jewish people seek forgiveness for the mistakes they've made, that chance to start afresh, and all of the holiness that comes with that day. And understandably, our sages explain that Yom Kippur is followed immediately by Sukkot. There's a small gap in between in order to prepare for the festival. But the nature of the days of Sukkot are Zman Simchasenu, they're days of celebration. One of the main reasons for that celebration is because we've had the atonement, that forgiveness on Yom Kippur, therefore we now have reason to celebrate. The other day the Mishnah identifies, aside from Yom Kippur, as being the day of one of huge celebration and significance for the Jewish people, is Tu B'Av. The 15th of Av is one of the two most significant days in the Jewish calendar that we have. Yet, you will not find it mentioned anywhere directly in Psukim in the Torah. You won't find it hinted anywhere directly as a day in Tanakh. And it only appears later in the Mishnah as the significance of the day. So what I thought we'd do is, let's talk about what actually happened on Tu B'Av. And then I had the great Siyat Dishmaya of yesterday having a share pop up on my WhatsApp group I'm part of hearing a beautiful idea from Rabbi Daniel Rowe, who was quoting the late Rosh Yeshiva of Eshet Torah in Israel, of Noach Weinberg, trying to link all of these different events that take place together. So we're going to try and just see what happened on Tu B'Av. Seemingly, what's the thematic connection between all of these different events that took place throughout different points of Jewish history. So we'll read the Gemara together, just briefly, kind of just pointing out the main ideas. This is a Gemara right at the end of Maseches Tanis, Lamed Beis and Lamed Aleph. And the Gemara quotes the Mishnah that says, "I'm Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, Lo Yahaya Yom Tovim LiYisrael Kachamisha Asa B'Av Yom Kippur." And there are no Yom Tovim for the Jewish people like the 15th of Av and Yom Kippur. And says the Gemara immediately that we understand, but Shlama Yom Kippur, and we understand that Yom Kippur is such a significant day because there's days of Slicha and Mechila. They're the days which the second set of tablets were given, the days which the Jewish people got forgiveness for their sins. Ella Tu B'Av Maihi. What is the 15th of Av? Before, why is it so important? What is it? And the Gemara goes forth to give a series of different answers of events that took place at different points of Jewish history on Tu B'Av and for the 15th of Av. Let's go through them. So the first is in the name of Rav Yehuda and Shmuel, and it says, Yom Shehetiru Shvatim Lavoy Zeh B'Zeh. This was the day in which the rabbis instructed, based on their understanding of the Psukim, that in fact marriage between different tribes, between the 12 tribes of the Jewish people, was in fact allowed. Now, when Hashem was giving the mitzvah of inheritance via the daughters of Slavchad, as we read fairly recently in the Torah, it seems to be suggested there that marriage between the different tribes was something that was prohibited. And that was in order that when the land was being passed down via the ancestral heritage between the tribes, you wouldn't come to matters of dispute, and the land would directly pass from each tribe within its own boundaries. So therefore, in order to avoid complicating that, having any lahavdil, Romeo and Juliet style disputes between different warring or families with broikas, that the idea was you married within your own tribe. The sages understood, though, in later generations, that command was in fact only for that generation as they were entering the land of Israel. It was not a mitzvah as part of the mitzvah given for the generations of the Jewish people. And in later generations, they decided it was permitted to marry between the different tribes. When was that decision reached and that teaching publicized to the rest of the Jewish people? On the 15th of Av. That's the first idea. Gemara says there's actually another similar decree that took place on the 15th of Av. Following the civil war that took place between the tribe of Binyamin and the other tribes, as described in Sefer Shoftim, again, there was a ban on the other tribes marrying into Shevet Binyamin. As a punishment for a role they played in a rebellion and acts of violence in the Jewish people, they were banned from marrying into each other. The problem was that left roughly 600 men from the tribe of Binyamin that were not married and had no one to marry. There were more men than women at that time. There was no women for them to marry. And therefore, they had to come up with a solution. What's going to be with all of these families, and potentially thousands of children and grandchildren that will come from them, what would be with them? They came up with different ideas. Eventually, they actually decided, though, that they would be allowed to marry into the other tribes. And again, that was on the 15th of Av. So we've got two similar enactments that took place on the 15th of Av. The Gemara then continues and then brings a totally disconnected, and in fact jumps earlier in Jewish history as another event that took place on the 15th of Av. In the name of this time Rabbi Yochanan, he said this was the day shekalu bo masei midbar. This was the day that the decree for those that would die in the desert concluded. Let's give a bit of background here. We know that on the 9th of Av, when the Jewish people were in the desert, the spies returned, as described in Parsha Shlach Lecha, from their fated mission, spying around the land of Israel. And although Yoshua and Caleb brought back a positive report about the land of Israel, the other 10 spies brought back a report and an interpretation which caused the Jewish people to lose hope and lose faith in Hashem and reject the possibility of going into the land of Israel. On that day, Hashem said, you're crying for nothing. You're crying over the fact that I'm not going to be able to take them to the land of Israel, which is really a mistake. So I'll give you something to cry for. And on this day, throughout generations, this will be a day of tears in the future, particularly for you, because you yourselves will not merit going to the land of Israel. Only your children will. Says the Medrash, what happened? That on each and every Tisha B'Av, each and every year on the 9th of Av, people would go to sleep that night, and many of them wouldn't wake up. And that process went on for approximately 39 years of that generation dying out. In fact, the Medrash describes how they would dig themselves graves and go to sleep in their graves, and simply some would not wake up in the morning. They'd finish the process of burial. On the 39th year, on Tisha B'Av, those that fated themselves as being the last ones to die out in the desert did wake up. So they thought to themselves, we must have got our dates wrong. Perhaps we miscalculated when Rosh Chodesh was, and maybe tomorrow is the day when we're not going to wake up. So they continued to do this process of lying down, expecting not to wake up for another 6 days until they get to see a full moon, and realizing at that point, it's definitely, we've not miscalculated the day, there's a full moon tonight. And on the 15th of Av, they said, the decree has clearly been rescinded, and we and our children will be able to enter into the land of Israel, and again took place on Tu B'Av. That's the third explanation. The fourth one describes something again much later in Tanakh that describes that the last king of the northern kingdom of Israel, Hoshea, he removed the roadblocks of centuries that were blocking people from getting to Yerushalayim. He was coming after Yerovam ben Nevat, who we know as a infamous leader of the Jewish people that led them astray and to worship idols. And in order to prevent people traveling up to Jerusalem to celebrate the festivals, he placed roadblocks with soldiers there blocking the people from going up to Jerusalem. In the days of Hoshea, he removed those roadblocks. It wasn't quite as simple as that, because Rashi here in the Gemara describes him still as a Rasha. He was also a wicked king. For what reason? Because he said to the Jewish people at that time, now I've removed the impediment that's blocking you from getting up to Yerushalayim. He said to them, so the king then said to him at that point, now you've got the choice. Whichever one you want to serve, meaning either the idols that were placed there by Yerovam or you can go up and serve Hashem in the Beis Hamikdash. Whichever one you choose, you can go ahead and do. For that reason, the Medrash says that the 10 tribes were taken into captivity in his kingship, in his time. Previously, the Jewish people were oinus. They were not responsible for the fact they couldn't go and serve Hashem in the Beis Hamikdash because they were prevented from doing so. Once it came to the time of Hosea, they now were given a choice and the ability to do so. And the fact that many of them still chose not to do so means he was culpable for an even greater calamity in his time, which is interesting. So that's our fourth event. And the final one, we've got two more, which is something we refer to actually in benching. The Rav Masna says that this was the day which all of the people that were slaughtered in Beitar, city still today in Eretz Yisrael, were granted burial. We know this was the great one of the bastions as kind of the Jewish community survived outside Yerushalayim once this city had been sacked and settled in the city of Beitar, and they tried there as part of the Bar Kokhba revolt to push back the enemies from them had taken over Israel at that time, and they were ill-fated, and the city was slaughtered. And the Romans did not allow the city's people to bury their dead. As a sign of, as a deterrent from don't start up with us again, you're going to sit here and watch the corpses rot. And it was on the 15th of Av, eventually years later, they were allowed to bury their dead. And in fact, we recognize that kindness from Hashem, even though it's of a tragic story, in benching still today. The last one is probably the most difficult to understand, that from the name of Rabbi and Rav Yosef, this was the day that the Kohanim in the time of the Beis Hamikdash would stop chopping wood. And again, now this is the reason the Gemara is trying to give us as to why Tu B'Av is one of the most significant days in the Jewish calendar. What does this describe? In order that there was plentiful wood to burn all of the offerings and various services in the temple, they needed to have plenty of wood, but the wood needed to be chopped and dried to make sure there was no worms still in the wood. So they would cut the wood, chop it up, and let it dry out in the sun to make sure if there was any creepy crawlies or insects or bugs or worms in the wood, they would have perished long before the wood would be used on the Mizbeach, because it would be considered to be disrespectful to have a non-kosher animal there within the woods being burnt on the Korbanos. And when did they stop this process? On the 15th of Av, in order that the wood would have plenty of time to dry out before it would be used in the next season's Korbanos. Why was that such a cause of celebration? Says the Gemara, from the fact that at that point the Kohanim were no longer being busy with this manual labor of preparing the woods for the Korbanos, they could sit and learn Torah. And that was a cause of celebration for them. They could sit and spend more time learning Torah, preparing themselves for the service of Hashem in the Beis Hamikdash. And then because of that reason, we are encouraged in the summer months to begin increasing the time we commit to learning Torah throughout the winter season, when perhaps it becomes more difficult with the days getting shorter. We're encouraged at this point to try and put more time into that. So we've got these 6 different events, some connected, some seemingly not, as why Tu B'Av becomes this enigmatic day of celebration. Again, we'll just review them quickly. We've got the 2 times in Jewish history which allowed marriages between tribes, or between the tribe of Binyamin and the rest of Jewish people. We've got the day in which the decree of those passing away in the desert was rescinded and people stopped dying. We've got Hosea allowing the people to travel up to Yerushalayim after Yeravam ben Nebat had blocked them from doing so. And we've got the people in Beitar being given, Kavuras Yisrael being given a burial after the murder there. And the 6th and final one, the day which the Kohanim ceased from preparing the wood for the Mizbeach. All very nice. What exactly are we to take from all of this? How can we understand this? So as I said, very happy yesterday as I was trying to think about how I'd link this all together and try and come up with something very clever. There's to put this all together, I had a beautiful idea from Noach Weinberg, and he said the following. We're in the period of time where the Haftorahs they were reading are all to do with one key theme. What's that key theme? Nechemta. Very good. Yes, this idea of Nechemta. Shibud and Nechemta, these are the 7 Haftorahs that are all about Nechemta. And that word Nechemta, we know it comes from the word Nachem, like we said on Tisha B'Av, and Nachama, and Nichem Avelin is common root, which is all about comforts. Yeah, we all know the joke about comfortee. I'm sure that Barry told us it's a good one, a classic. It's a good one. Okay, yeah. So Nachem Ami, as we read, Parshas Nachamu, and we'll continue to develop that theme. That word Nachama, to give comfort, also is used elsewhere in Chumash. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu, after seeing the generations coming, after Adam Arishon, says something quite stark and quite unbelievable. He says that he regrets making man, and he used that word, nachem. He regrets the ways of man. He's going to decide he's going to start the world again from the next parasha, which is with Noach, and rebuild the world in a new form and a new structure. So for Yirmiyah, he also used that word nachem to talk about regretting, but not just a regretting, but restarting again with a new perspective. In fact, when we're doing nichem avelim, what exactly are we trying to do? I mean, it's a nice idea. It's obviously a kind thing to go bring comfort to a mourner. But what exactly is the idea? What are we trying to achieve? The idea of avelis is when someone feels like they are disconnected, they're stuck and confronted and held by their grief. Nichem avelim is when you try to show a person, of course, that grief is real, that grief is genuine, and it's something that needs to be processed, but there is something beyond your grief. There's a new perspective, there's a new paradigm. You won't be here in Shiva forever. And after Shloshim, there's the year, and after the year, then there's a return to normality as much as can be without forgetting that which has gone before. But that's what Nichem Avedim, it's bringing comfort. It's not just, a pat on the back of you'll be okay. How do we therefore link that theme of Nechama to all of these events? In all, the common thread between all of these 6 events is the Jewish people, whether as individuals or as communities, were stuck in a particular paradigm that they've said, we can't get beyond this. When there's a situation where there are couples or there are individuals that can't become couples, they can't get married because there's no one for us to marry, because we have to marry within our tribe. And we've been here and there's no one here. You're stuck. You're stuck. So therefore, the Jewish people, guided by the sages, looked into the Torah and said, actually, no, there's no prohibition. You can go outside and build your new homes, build your bayis ne'eman with people that are outside of your tribes. And the same thing in Shevet Binyamin. You had these hundreds of men that were not able to seek beyond their tribe, and there was no one for them to marry. They were stuck in the paradigm they were in. So therefore, they were allowed to, on Tu B'Av, to go and marry outside of their tribe and build a better future. What was the third one? The generation that was in the Midbar essentially were on death row for 39 years. We don't think about this. But in fact, the Gemara says something very stark. Moshe, Hashem refrained from speaking with Moshe during that time in the Midbar on many occasions because of the level of lack of simcha among the Jewish people. We know famously that the Shekhinah, the divine presence, only rests on someone that feels simcha. Doesn't mean that person has to be jumping and dancing and acting the fool, but has a level of satisfaction and happiness within themselves. And because there was this constant fear and depression of, we're just going to die here in the desert, then Hashem was unable to speak to Moshe at that point. They were stuck. Our children will get to go, but we're just waiting for when will be the morning that we don't wake up. Once they saw that decree had been rescinded, it was possible for them to think about Eretz Yisrael, think about a Jewish future, think about living with their children and building the lands that Hashem had promised them in a different way. It's again a paradigm shift when they moved from being blocked and prevented from thinking beyond their current situation to the next one. Similarly, we can say, what was the significance of the people burying their dead in Beitar? I mean, quite literally, if the Levaya has not even taken place, how a person is expected to be able to move on from their grief is impossible. We know halachically, there's an oinen. A person is exempt from mitzvahs. Can't think it should not think about anything beyond the immediacy of just take care of the burial. Once you've got to that point, exactly as you said, then there's a shiva, then there's a process of moving on. But until that burial is taking place, you're just stuck, confronted with that tragedy. Once the burial takes place, there's now a nechama of what could be in the future. And the final one, significantly, that I think perhaps a message for all of us, that the Kohanim, whilst they were busy the whole time, just preparing the physical aspects of the running of the Beis Hamikdash, they were limited with what in fact they could achieve. We're told fascinatingly that when Paro wanted to block the Jewish people from having real hope about escaping Mitzrayim, about really having belief that Hashem would save them and take them out of their slavery, what did he do in order to compound that fear? He said, they're going to have to make their bricks, but I'm not going to give them the raw materials to do it anymore. They're going to have to do it themselves. Explains the Ramchal, Mesilas Yesharim. Why does he do that? Because now they were totally consumed with the pressure, the fear, the anxiety of where are we going to get our work done? We're just going to be working the whole time. So there's no hope for something different, for being saved, for getting out of our situation. Once the Kohanim were given a break from, don't worry about, chopping the wood and preparing them for the base of English, go learn. Go think about what it means to be Jewish. What does it mean that you're a Kohen serving in the Beis HaMikdash? You can really shift your perspective and your paradigm. I therefore think we can say that Tu B'Av is such a significant day because it gives us that ability to move from a Tisha B'Av where we were just a few days ago sitting on the floor, confronted with the destruction of Jerusalem and the lowly state of the Jewish people and all of the problems and sorrows that have been throughout Jewish history, including the ones that we face today with enemies surrounding us, both around the land of Israel, both in the university campuses, in the media, and social media, and all the threats that we face. And it's a scary time out there. And we have to sit on Tisha B'Av and confront that and recognize that all of that comes from the original Churban, the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, and the lack of having our relationship with Hashem as it should be expressed with a rebuilt Jerusalem. But from there we can say, if we've recognized where we are, we can know where we need to get to. That's Nacham. That's Nacham. That's comfort. Nothing's changed. The situation's still the same, but if we know where we are and we know where we're trying to head to, one can get Nachama for that. For that reason, and it's Hashem, this week we're going to have a Yom Tov. It's not going to be a Yom Tov where there's an Issa Malacha. There's not going to be a Yom Tov where we have Yom Tov meals. But within ourselves and within our tefillahs and within our own personality and psyche, we can recognize that now is the time for comfort. And therefore, very beautifully, we've got a Tisha B'Av, we've got a Tu B'Av, and we're heading on just a few weeks away to Rosh Hashanah, where we'll stand in front of Hashem saying, we were just on the floor a little while ago. Now we're standing in front of you, sounding that shofar. Mitzvah Hashem, that will be a shofar that signs for us, all of us, a ksiva v'chesiva tova, signing and sealing for a good year. But ultimately, that would be the ultimate and most profound expression of that good year, which will be a year which delivers redemption for all of the Jewish people, safety for all of the Jewish people, and ultimately the coming of Mashiach.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you. I will say goodbye to those on Zoom, just to say that you can hear that on Zoom as well. Tomorrow being Tu B'Av, we are having a l'chaim here in short to mark the occasion with little heart-shaped balloons and what have you, maybe. Okay.